dedicated to each and every one of you who appreciate a great glass of wine. You know what I mean?
It's Monday. Let's raise a glass to the beginning of another week. It's time to unscrew, uncork, or saber a bottle, and let's begin exploring the wine glass. Welcome to a special live episode of the podcast recorded on location at ZINposium, a Tale of Two Zins, an immersive seated masterclass created by true Zinfandel lovers. In this episode, we take you inside this incredible seminar featuring two outstanding Paso Robles producers, Guyomar and Brochelle, as they share their stories, philosophies, and some truly remarkable wines. Because this episode was recorded live during the tasting, you'll hear the energy of the room throughout, clinking glasses, conversations, and the ambient sounds of guests enjoying the experience right alongside us. We wanted to mention that upfront because while there is background noise, there is all part of the atmosphere and authenticity of being there in the moment. And what a moment it was. This seminar was thoughtful, engaging, and full of insight into the beauty and diversity of Zinfandel, with incredible wines that made this tasting especially memorable. So pour yourself a glass, settle in, and join us as we revisit ZINposium, a Tale of Two Zins.
Give me the red wine.
Hey everybody, I'm Lori Budd, a UC Davis winemaking program, Spanish wine scholar, sommelier service, champagne and Cote d'Ivoire specialist, and a WSET Level 2 graduate. You can find Exploring the Wine Glass on all the socials, as well as your favorite podcast catchers. If you haven't subscribed yet, now's the perfect time to swipe, subscribe, rate, and review. Stay in the know about all things wine by visiting my website, exploringthewineglass.com. I promise I'll never tell you what to drink, but I'll always share what's in my glass.
Even in the Bible, water gon' turn.
You know, where Rochelle and I come from and how Rochelle started. And that is the wine to your very left. The very first wine to your left. So this is, are you talking wine yet or not yet?
Yeah,
Or am I going too fast here?
I'm gonna slowly sip this. We're gonna get into this first one in just a moment here, but just take a little bit. We just want you to get, we can.
We're trying to get to some of the history.
Yeah, so anyway, that's the first wine that we'll get into. So, you can kind of see, I grew up in the Central Valley, Clovis, Fresno area is where I grew up. And grew up in kind of in the farming industry, raised beef cattle, and we also farmed pigs. And you can look at my facial expression. I don't like pigs now. I had to pick those damn things during the summer. But and then I migrated over here to the coast, and I went to Cal Poly. So it was far enough away from home, but close enough so that I could go and get my laundry done once a month. And Paso Robles was the town that I would drive through, and who would have ever guessed back then that this is where I would have my roots, and we would plant a vineyard and grow our grapes and raise two boys and whatnot. It's kind of surreal, because I literally moved right through Paso, and it was pretty much when I came through here, it was a one-horse town. It was, it was a lot of, just alfalfa, guys running cattle. Downtown was cobwebs and police signs, like in all the buildings. It was crazy to see the transformation. I think we had Boosie's on the Park, which is now where Happy McGregor's is at. You had the Inn, it was an A&W root beer right on Spring Street. It was crazy. It's like transformed. But that's kind of our history. And then we planted in 97, and then 1998 was, we're on the hills. 97, 98 was crazy amount of, it was El Nino, and it was crazy amount of rain. And this gentleman here helped us plant the vineyard, kind of lay everything out. And that's an important piece to this, to the project is, road direction with where the sun, rises and sets, and wind direction. And so he was, he actually, when he was little, he ran into our hills that were, so he knew like our plot of land. He ran into them. It was all almond trees, or he used to call them almonds. So we got linked up with him, and he helped us, like literally lay out the vineyard. I was 27 years old, and I was classically schooled at Cal Poly, thought I knew everything, and then he shows up and he's like, no, you don't know crap. I'm gonna teach you, and it was awesome. So And then in 2010, we opened up our first kind of retail establishment. So from 98 to 2010, Michelle and I, what we call BK, before kids. We get on airplanes and we go visit markets. So we were in places like Florida, North and South Carolina, Chicago. We actually went to Hawaii a couple times. We had a distributor in Hawaii for a bit of time, and that was fun. Yeah. So that's how we sold our wine. And then in 2010, we decided to open up a tasting room. We had so many people just continually asking us, to come visit, and so we finally made that happen. So that's kind of the rundown, and then obviously here we are in 2026, and gosh, it's been a road, it's been a ride, but we've been so blessed to be able to do what we do. Wake up every day, and wake up in the middle of the vineyard, and just do what.
And have a really hot husband who's a winemaker. I can't get any better.
Yeah, so that's kind of the nuts and bolts of trivia. Brochelle is, some people don't actually know that.
I just told somebody the other day they didn't know. Like, how'd you get the name? I'm like, Brock and Michelle. But I guess it's not so apparent.
The running joke is
Much better than Miak.
And the running joke is I come first, BRO, but then she has more letters.
But you're BROC, so we
yeah, but that's what I
share
said, but you have more letters, I guess, when you add it all together. But anyway, that's kind of the running joke. Anyway, that's fun. So, so we'll kind of get into the wine next. We kind of talk about the vineyard and obviously the wine that you have. And so again, it's all the way to the left. And so we planted, like I said, in 1998. Fast forward, what is in your glass is 2024. We're releasing that actually this weekend. So yesterday was the first day that anybody in the public can taste it and purchase it. So super excited. 24 was kind of that tweener vintage where 23 kind of across the board, big wines, kind of a real classic California vintage and has gained a lot of notoriety. And we find that the guys north of us in Napa kind of dictate when a vintage is good or not. And we're slowly starting to kind of come into our own, and now we're able to kind of command a little bit more respect in Paso and say, we're going to delineate a superb vintage or maybe more linear vintage and whatnot. And 24 was kind of that tweener, was a little bit shorter on the production side of things, but kind of an ideal growing season, other than we saw this crazy kind of heat spell that came in right after the vines go, what we call it, when they kind of start turning color, right? So it's called duration. And we saw some pretty good size, temperature swings over 105, 100, close to 110, and during the day. And so that kind of concentrated flavors, and it's a beautiful wine. It's kind of that classic Brochelle Zin. So you guys will really enjoy the 24. So we'll kind of talk about where we're at. So we're in the Atlanta district. So I don't know if those of you that know Justin Winery, the name, right? So the gentleman that used to own it, him and his wife, was Justin Baldwin and Deborah Baldwin. They owned Justin for decades, and then sold the property before, and the winery and whatnot. But before he sold it, he got together with a few people, including us, and he was wanting to break up Paso into these different appellations, right? And so you'll find, so when Ishka will talk where he's at, and in each appellation has a very distinct soil structure, very distinct microclimate, right? So where we're at, we're pushed up right against the San Lucia Mountain. We're at the base of it. So from where our vineyard is at to the Pacific Ocean is literally about 11 miles. So we're literally only 11 miles to the Pacific Ocean. But what separates us is that San Lucia Mountain range, and that's what gets us so hot during the day. We'll see temperatures, well into the hundreds, and then at night we're down into the mid-50s. So it's literally a 50-degree, 45 to 50-degree temperature swing, and that's what makes Paso very unique. in, most wine growing regions, you don't see that diurnal shift of 45 degrees. Conversely, like you go up north, like Napa, their diurnal shift is, maybe 15 degrees, sometimes 8, 10, 15 degrees, that's it, from day to night. That's why Cab does really well up there, and they struggle with some of the varietals that do really well down there, like Zinfandel and some of the Roman varietals. That temperature inversion, hot during the day and then the cooling off at night gives the vines an opportunity to really just like go to sleep and relax. And so they're not building sugars during the night where the temperature was above 60 some odd degrees. They're still accumulating sugars. And so when you end up you get pushed into the valley, that's where they end up. And so, there's guys that are in the valley, and Zinfandel's been growing in the Central Valley for forever. And you find a lot of those zins for most vintages and most years are flabby and are kind of interesting because, they don't see the drop off at night, with the temperature swing. And so the vines are constantly accumulating sugar, and so they're kind of trying to figure out this dysfunctional, like, when do I pick? Is it ripe, not ripe, is it overripe? And the acid never kind of comes in line with maturity. So Paso is literally one of the only places in the world where we see this crazy from day to night temperature swings. So in the Atlanta district, you can kind of see we push a little bit north of downtown Paso, and then all the way to the out towards the Pacific Ocean, and so you kind of get a visual of kind of where we're at. And I need to probably talk to whoever put this thing together because I don't see Zinfandel.
Right, exactly.
Who's in charge of putting this together?
Wine Folly.
Wine Folly? I need to figure out who's in charge of Wine Folly because that.
It's a folly.
It's kind of in the name.
That's not going to work. Because I mean, there's a number of us that are in Adelaide that in Richard Tourette, his vineyards. We're kind of in our neighborhood, and so just like I said, it's kind of unique. And then Adelaide actually pushes back up into the San Lucia Mountains, so where you get kind of where like Topples Creek, they're pushed back in there, and so a little bit cooler because they're closer to the ocean and they're not as protected, as far as like this. Literally, we're in a valley and then we sit up on top of the vineyard. It's about 1,100 feet elevation. And we run from top to bottom about 150 feet, so it's fairly drastic, in just 20 acres, you can kind of visualize, 150 feet in elevation changes. It's fairly dramatic and fairly drastic. So yeah, you tried the wine yet?
Nope.
So let's get into it. God, kind of pacey group.
How many acres is Zin would you guess are in the area, say in the Paso district?
Well, I mean, I would say, I don't know. I mean, it's going. Acres of Zinfandel that's still in the ground. I mean, what's that?
Less than 1,000.
I would. Yeah, at least. Yeah, I would. I mean, yeah. I would say maybe 500-600 acres potentially. When we started. So when we started, we were the 29th Flounder Winery back in 1997, and if you went out tasting, there wasn't a lot of tasting then, of course, but when you went tasting, everybody had a Zinfandel on their tasting menu, and through the course of time, a lot of our colleagues and people that have been in wineries and folks that have been in this business as long as Michelle and I have kind of walked away from Zinfandel and kind of gravitated towards Rome varietals and of course your Bordeaux varietals or blends and whatnot. And so a lot of the vines, Zinfandel vines, started coming out, and you have the plant material that we got from our vineyard is from Rhoda, which is not too far from where Ish is at, and this new group came in and purchased the property, and if I'm not mistaken, they ripped out all those vines. Yeah, all of them.
Wow.
I mean, these were vines they were all head trained Zinfandel. Not necessarily ancient vines, but I mean, they were very old vines. and pull them out, and I don't know what they put in there, Syrah or, you know, it's just heartbreaking, right? Because it's just, you know, you can't get back to that time. So.
Why do they do it?
Well, I think, you know, I think everybody's trying to chase the upper echelon of what they think. So, you know, we started at the same time with guys like Justin Smith, Saxon, right? And that name may or may not resonate to some of you. Justin Smith, basically the same age as me. They're in the Willow Creek district. Started making Syrah. Got a 100-point wine from Wine Spectator. I don't even know, was that 01, 02 or something like that. So he's kind of a darling child. So everybody's been kind of trying to chase his formula, you know, and we always joke, I mean, Anishka and I will always joke, you know, all these new folks that come in, what do they have on their menu? They got an $80 bottle of GSM. And you're like, dude, that's like everybody's doing that. So, but that's what's happened here is that everybody's kind of, you know, trying to copy or mimic or try to emulate something that's already been done, right? And then now you're seeing people are trying to emulate what Daniel and David Dow did with Cabernet Sauvignon here on, you know, here in Paso Robles. And they've done a really good job of elevating Cabernet Sauvignon, but they've also figured out where to grow Cabernet and where not to. And when we first started, most of your Cabernet Sauvignon was grown on the east side of Paso, and it was very just dysfunctional. It just didn't come together really well in the glass. And so I think that those are kind of the two things that kind of have kind of edged Zinfandel. And we kind of did it to ourselves a little bit as well, you know, as an industry. You know, back when we first started, those very early vintages, I mean, they were big wines. I mean, you could spin the label, and we're like 16.5, 16.6. And, you know, and that's what the consumer at that time was wanting. And so we're making these full throttle, high octane, you know, big wines. And I think it started losing its favor with folks that really wanted an elegant wine that Zin can be and is. And so now we started kind of dialing that back. But it was, you know, back in the day, you know, I would literally pick on, you know, sugars and wanted that, you know, 16.5, 16.6, 16.7. Sometimes close to 17% alcohol, and I think it's just kind of lost favor, you know. But I tell you what, we did a taste. We were members of this group. It's called ZAP, and it stands for Zinfandel Advocates and Producers. And we would do these tastings back in like 02, 03, 04, 05, and literally people would come up to our table and they would look at the label, and they were looking for something that was at least 15.5 or higher. If it was less than that, they would literally turn, look at it, and they would go to the next table. Yep. And it was just crazy time, you know, what people were wanting, at least in particular was in. And so we kind of taken a step back, reevaluated what is it that we really want to put in the glass, what is it we really want to put in front of people, and getting back to a place that is elegant and has. Yeah.
What is the alcohol level like?
So this one here is 15. No, 14.9. 14.9. So, yeah, and I think, you know, so we kind of talked a little bit about, you know, you can kind of run through some of the tasting notes, and we paired it with some Guyomar cheese. I think that's a perfect pairing. It really, you know, kind of brings out, you know, some of that, you know, I like that, you know, like halala berry, some of that kind of black cherry, kind of really kind of be pulled out of this wine. So we'll kind of talk about what we do. We'll give him, you know, get his take on it as well. So, you know, this gentleman here kind of got us going in a direction that is kind of atypical as far as how you lay out your vineyard. We talked about, you know, grow direction and also helped us integrate with what we call entrains or bush vines. So they end up looking like little miniature trees. And so that's the inspiration for our label. This is what they look like in the vineyard, right here. And so a lot of reasons why we decided to do it that way. So it's wide spacing, so you get, you know, less competition in the soil for nutrients and water. And so both of us dryland farm our vineyards, and so we're 100% relying on what Mother Nature gives us year in, year out. So the last couple of years, Ishka and I were out doing the rain dance because we, since 03, 23, 24, and then this, 25, and going into this 26, we've literally been doing the rain dances. We had at least a long period of time. You were talking over a decade of less than normal rainfall here in Paso.
So I think I might come and assist because.
Yeah, come on up. So we're going to talk about head trained vines. So I'm going to turn it over to him. As you probably heard my voice a little bit. But there are some important aspects to head training, and I'll let you speak to that.
Right. So I'm a professional farmer. That's what I do for a living. I farm. Zinfandel is the American heritage grape. When we speak about Zinfandel, when you talk about the legacy of a wine, you find a wine that is 10, 15, 20 years old and aging well, it is a Zinfandel because it has natural acidity. What is acid? Acid can be derived in two manners. One is, as Brock spoke earlier, the cooling nature of the evening, and most importantly, dry farming. When a root goes 30, 35 feet down there, the minerality of soil maintains acidity. That's what Zinfandel is all about. Did I mention that it was America's heritage grape? Yes, because it mimics all of us. That's what Zinfandel is about. It is the beauty, it is the fabric of America. When you drink the plethora of wine in front of you, you will see the nuanced nature of this wine. And people forget about tradition and history. No, the two of us are maintaining it. We are deeply rooted in the tradition of what made Paso Robles great. Zinfandel.
Gosh, how do I top that?
You can't. He's not passionate at all.
I asked about why you chose
He's hired.
when you started growing, is that why you chose Zinfandel?
Yeah, it's something that, Michelle and I, it's America's grape, it's California's grape. It doesn't grow any other place other than Croatia. That's where it came from. When we first started, we didn't know where the hell Zinfandel came from. UC Davis did a huge, brought in some experts and spent a bunch of time trying to figure out where did Zin come from. And so originated from Croatia and brought here, obviously to America. And it just doesn't grow well in any other climate because it kind of goes back to, soil structure and microclimate where you see this, this crazy diurnal shift. It needs the heat to develop flavors, develop phenolics, develop the flavors that we're looking for, yet you gotta have the nights where the vines literally shut down and they go to sleep for, 6, 7, 8 hours and then wake back up when it starts getting hot again. You just don't get that anywhere else. Santa Barbara County, it's too temperate down there. Central Valley to me, it's too hot and they don't cool off at night. And Napa has always struggled for the most part. There's a few guys that do a decent job at it, but I think they hit a vintage and then it's like, oh my gosh, but most of their vintages are just they're I guess mediocre or just okay. But we can actually hit the mark every year. And you kind of look back, history for me, back from when I started, you kind of see my quirkiness of just my experience with the wines, but the wines always showed true to the vineyard. And as I've gotten, I think, more accustomed to winemaking and more accustomed to like what's going on in the vineyard, the wines have definitely been elevated for sure. Yes, sir.
What do you do for like soil management? What I mean, like, do you have to add the nutrients? Do you mulch? Are you just relying on the natural mineralization of what the roots are pulling?
Yeah, that's a great question. So how we handle it is you know, on really good years when we have, you know, a lot of rainfall, there are times, you know, we'll plant some seeds, some cover crop, or let the natural cover crop grow, you know, and uproot and, you know, get to a certain height or level. And then what I do is I'll mow that, and all that green leafy, broadleaf plant material is all nitrogen, right? And so we'll mow it, let it sit, and then I actually cultivate. So that's what we call disking or turning the soil. And so what we end up doing is we create a cap on top, and it's a moisture cap, and so it actually preserves the moisture that's underneath where I cultivate. So we take the weeds and you know, get them to where they're not sucking the moisture out of the soil, and then we create this moisture barrier cap, and that's what helps them sustain themselves through, because we don't irrigate, so that it sustains them through the whole growing season, getting them to harvest and all that. And so these years where we don't have a lot of rain, it can be a little stressful. And so those things are we try to mitigate or manage in the vineyard. So a lot of times we'll come in and, you know, do some shoot thinning or cluster thinning and making sure that, you know, maybe we keep the crop loads on the lighter side of things, especially when we know that we're kind of in this, you know, drought, you know, season or, you know, whatever. We try to do, you know, and then sometimes we'll make a decision kind of midstream. We're thinking it looks like, you know, we're going to get a lot of rain, and then all of a sudden the faucet gets turned off, and you know, this might be one of those years where we got a lot of rain in a few, you know, storms. I mean, that last storm we ended up with, I think it was 6 inches just came in, you know, in a matter of a few days. It was crazy. So Paso, I think in general, I think if you look at the overall, you know, we'll talk about rainfall. I would say an average rainfall, just kind of Paso Robles, and in every microclimate's a little bit different. So the average rainfall is typically around 12 inches, is what, you know, you get out kind of towards the airport or east side, and I would say that their normal rainfall probably might be, you know, 7 to 8 inches. As you get closer to the, you know, the Los Padres Sales, the mountain range, your rainfall will definitely dramatically increase. So, you know, for us at our vineyard, the state vineyard, I would say a normal rainfall, you know, would probably be that 15 to 16, you know, inch number. And we have had, like I said, we've got to go back from, I think it was 2010, you know, all the way through 2022. You know, most of those years were less than 15 inches at our place. And then you look at like this year, we've accumulated, I think, about 28 inches. So, so just, yeah, I mean, you're just relying on Mother Nature, and just, you know, talking what, you know, what Ishka's talking about is like having that traditional farming, you know, being good stewards of the land, right? And so, yeah, you know, both organic, you know, operations and those things are, you know, those things are important to us. You know, you got to build back in what you're pulling out. And I think that's a great question because, you know, a lot of times we see a lot of our colleagues are putting a lot of inputs in, you know, that are synthetic or manufactured inputs to try to mitigate whatever problem they have. And if you don't do your damn job in the vineyard, then you're going to have problems on the other side. You're going to have to use some sort of synthetic product to get yourself out of it. We hear that a lot. We see that a lot. You know, but yeah.
You talked about grape coming from Croatia. Can you talk a little bit about the relationship between Primitivo and Zinfandel, if there is any?
There is, yeah. So I mean, Primitivo is kind of the plant material or the mother vine of Zinfandel. So there's a direct relationship to it. Absolutely, yes. Yeah.
Genetically, it's the same as the Croatian wine.
Yep.
So Zinfandel, Primitivo, Sinonia, Kashkalansky, they are all the same grape.
I have that up there, but it was too many letters.
I think the last time we did that, we had a little quiz, and how do you say that?
It's actually not that hard. Croatian, I don't speak Croatian, but the rules are very clear, unlike English. English is impossible to pronounce if you don't speak the language. But Croatian, if you know the rules, you can sound like you're an expert.
But I beg to differ. I've done Zinfandel. There's no correlation.
That could be terroir.
No, it is about, I think there is a very marked demarcation between the two. learned opinion.
And I would agree with that. I mean, I think the two of us have been around enough, and we have played with both Sin and Primitivo, and there is a difference. And so I think you have experts that say one thing, and then we have kind of world experience. I mean, we're growing it, we make wine from it, so we kind of are able to see, the different nuance that kind of comes to the table. But, we'll stick to whatever the experts are saying, but that's kind of where we're at. Yeah. So.
The next Brochelle glass.
Okay, so now we're going to skip to number 3. It's in our glass, the Brochelle glass. So let's go to the third one.
We're supposed to drink 2, right?
I'm sorry?
So we're supposed to drink number 2, we're skipping it.
Yeah. So it's in the Brochelle glass. So the third glass is the Brochelle glass. So you'll see, as you smell, if you smell, you'll get
Totally
you should be able to get a radically different nuance on the nose. And so this goes back a vintage. So this is 2023, and it's actually our rear stop reserve. So this ends up being a wine club member only wine. So those of you that are in the wine club know this wine, and may or may not know some of the history behind it. So going back to the vineyard, we sit up on a hillside, up on a hill, and up where the house is at, and the vines, like I said, they run about 150 feet from top to bottom. So we got this ridge. That's kind of where the house is at. Runs kind of, I guess, east to west, and so we picked that separately. Obviously, ferment it separately, and then obviously barrel it separately, and so that's kind of the first unique aspect of it. So, and it's in this deep limestone, so it's chalk rock, and so the vines struggle year in and year out, no matter what rainfall we get. They struggle every single year, and so you get that concentration of flavors, but still maintain that balance with that acid, the acid, because like Ishka talked about, where that chalk rock, where those roots literally, when you dry land farm a vineyard, the rule of thumb is for every year you get about a foot of root penetration. And so when you're talking a vineyard that's 30 years in the making, you're about 25 to 30 feet literally straight down. Because when you're not irrigating, the root systems have to they gotta go find water, and the only way to find water is to go down. And so that's where so every year they're literally searching for the water that, as they complete the water at the upper level, soil level, they're looking for water, and they continually go down. So the ridge stop is that special strata in our vineyard, and then I handle it a little differently in the cellar. It's 100% brand new French oak, so you're going to get all the, going back to the original slide where you're kind of smelling the different nuances. So this, you'll get some of that clove and some of that nutmeg, and that's coming from the barrel, and maybe a little bit of that cinnamon, and so it makes it very unique. So you get a lot of the raspberry and black cherry on the palate, but on the nose, you're going to get a lot more of that sensory from the barrel regime, and that's done on purpose. So you kind of are able to get some of those upper, kind of different flavor profiles. Like I said, don't come from the vineyard. Those flavors don't come from grapes.
And Rob, when you mentioned dry farming, meaning the plant is working in an assiduous manner to ascertain its moisture. That means our root zones are 30, 35 feet down there. To bring the moisture from down there to the surface against gravity is a workload. That is stress. Stress in wine creates character. In the human nature, perhaps not. But that is what makes Zinfandel so unique. Particularly dry farm vineyards. When we speak about dry farm vineyards, we are in the 1%. Two of us, in the 1%.
Oh, 100%.
Yes. Yeah. 99% of vineyards are irrigated vineyards. Their root zones are close to the surface where moisture comes from. They are embedded in topsoil. We are embedded in minerality. A variety is a variety, but what elevates a variety mineral. All our wines are mineral infused.
It's true.
Yes.
And we have the benefit, where we've been doing this so long, where you go back in time and you look at the wines from, at least from the beginning of when I started, and you see the depth of flavor and the more complexity of the wines that gravitate towards, because just as Ishka pointed out, where you've got root zones that are penetrating down 25, 30 feet plus in the soil. So those first couple of years, 3 years, we actually irrigated our vineyards, so we have irrigation to keep them established, and so and that's done on purpose to get them rooted, get them established, and then literally wean them off of the water. And so now they have to go and they gotta go find water. That's their only way to sustain themselves, especially as you get farther down the line. When you're talking September, October, when they're accumulating all the sugars and the phenolics, that's when there's a big load of nutrients they're pulling out of the soil, and they're obviously pulling water. That's the biggest demand that we see. Typically, is flowering is a huge demand with nutrients and water, but normally flowering is usually kind of that late April, first part of May. So there's still a lot of moisture in the soil, right? But then you get to September and it can be pretty dry, and so that's where they're like, they gotta go find water, and they do. It's crazy. So.
How did you make that decision when you first started?
Yeah, so Michelle and I went, we were young bucks, and so we always talk about, city girl meets country boy. And so when the two of us got together, I was actually, I was involved in a brew pub, and I was making beer and managing and running this brewery back in the day. And
It takes a lot of good beer to make great wine.
Yes, it does. And I am subscribed to that, especially in September and October. But the two of us, so she came into the brewery one night, and we kind of, we hit it off, and obviously, and so her growers were going to Napa, and I studied grape growing and winemaking when I was at Poly, but they didn't have like a degree in either one of them. So I think I took 2 classes in enology. I think it was like 2.5 classes of viticulture. We planted a Guyomar and Brochelle Vineyards at Poly, whatever the hell that was, 93, 2. But anyway, I knew the farming aspect of it, and so I went to Poly, and I was an ag business major, and I wasn't sure that was something I wanted to get back into, was farming, and so I was kind of, I was in the brewery business and kind of in the business side of things, and then Michelle and her girlfriends would go to Napa and taste your wines, and so I would be the guy that could geek out and talk about phenolics and color, and they're like, dude, this guy's like 26 years old. What the hell is he doing? But I could carry a conversation with these winemakers, and people were like, dude, this is crazy. But I got to see this side of it, and I'm like, oh, this is kind of fun, And so about 2 years of us dating and kind of figuring out what we wanted to do collectively, we decided this is what we wanted to do, and bought our property in 1997, and
well, we came tasting to Paso because, like, when you went to Cal Poly during that time, you didn't go to Paso for anything except for maybe the fair. During the fair,
that's the only way that's the only reason you go to Paso.
And I would say, God, there's some wineries here. Why don't we go taste it? Oh no, we don't go to Paso. And I'm like, I had no preconceived notion. I'm from LA.
When I would go from San Luis to home, I didn't even stop here to get gas.
Yeah.
I filled up there and I never stopped there.
I was like, there's all these wineries here. Let's go check them out. And I was on a third winery. It's Everly, right?
Yeah, it was Everly.
My memory was Everly. We had a Zinfandel there, and we're just like, what is this?
Well, it was 1995 vintage, and this gentleman was growing grapes, and he grew grapes for kind of a couple different operations locally. One of them was Everly. Did I do something wrong? Rosenblum, and that's a label that kind of really elevated, Richard Strett, his brand, in his vineyard. But back in the day, we walked into Gary Everly's place, and they were pouring a Zinfandel that literally just floored us.
But
and
it had
was-
Surratt's name on it.
Yeah, well, we didn't know this guy's name, at
Yeah,
the time.
they had
But we have this
seven
wine,
names.
we're like, dude, this is it. This is what we want to do. And it was that kind of aha moment, we're like, dude, this is what we want
Well,
to
because
do.
that
and-
particular wine just, we had been tasting Napa cabs. Then we tasted the Zinfandel, and we're just like, what is
You gotta knock your
this?
socks off.
It
Yeah,
was
dude.
like literally an aha light bulb moment. I mean, for us, and then weirdly, then we found the property that we ended up buying, and he goes, I'm best friends with Richard Surratt, and we're just like, what? Are you kidding me? And we're just like,
I need to come up with this conversation.
Well, yeah, Ish and I have similar stories and probably not similar stories with
Yeah.
Richard Surratt. so-
right.
We can't speak about Zinfandel without utilizing the namesake of this grand man,
Yes.
because he was the masterclass, the godfather of what we call head-trained dry farm Zinfandel. Now, when there was a person who was able to function a vineyard, create an elixir, and every wine in today's lexicon is manipulated. Those were the old world wines where the vineyard spoke. The vineyard spoke. Wines were made in the vineyard, not in the winery. This is what you must understand. That's all about. We are two learned students of his charisma. Learned students of his charisma. We have taken the tradition forward. Not to be replicated.
Yeah, I remember the first time I met him, it was like shaking his hand, two things. One was it literally felt his callus, it felt like you were shaking his hand, like you literally just grabbed some dirt and shook your hand. And then the second thing that came, so you felt that at first, and then he grabbed it with such flipping, like, I'm like, I tried to control that it hurt, because I was like, oh. And I grew up with, my dad was like, you've got to have that firm handshake, and I was like, dude, I never met a guy
Okay, but have you ever tried to arm wrestle Richard Surratt?
No, I knew that.
He didn't know better.
Yeah, no, right.
I broke my arm.
Yeah. Well, after the handshake, I was like, I'm not.
He's like, no way.
Yeah, no, we got some great stories. And so, and Richard was in our, where he grew up, the house he grew up in is actually not, it's right down underneath where we live. And it's actually part of this winery called Copia. And the house is kind of right next to where the winery's at. That's where Richard grew up. And so he ran in, like I said, ran in our hills, and we're like, we sit up and we look down and we see, Copia and all that. And but yeah, Richard. So he had vineyards that were in our neck of the woods, and so he would be in town doing something, and then there were times he would come to my front door, and I knew the color of his truck, and there were a couple times I just got on the quad and I went to the farthest corner because I knew I was going to get yelled at. So he was kind of like my second father from that perspective. But yeah, I mean there were times that he lay into me. Huh?
Where did he learn everything from?
So for him, I mean, he grew up planting. So the first vineyard, the Bellamy Acres, and that's where we got our cuttings from. He planted in, I think he said 1952, and so I mean, he was planting vines. His dad was like, because he wanted to plant grapevines, and his dad was like, "Well, you're on your own." And he would tell us stories of running garden hoses, hooking up garden hoses and watering plants after school. When he said he planted his first vineyard at 12 to 13 years old.
So he was a brilliant man. He got a scholarship to go and play football at UCLA, but he was a product of the Depression. He had to stay on the farm and work, satiate his parents. That is what
That's right.
He
Forgot that story.
I mean, he would have been a football playing, he was a brilliant man.
Yeah, but he had to work.
And the remnants of Zinfandel in Paso Robles, Mr. Brock Waterman, myself in a small way, is a legacy to him.
Nice.
Yes.
That's nice.
Yeah, and I don't think his sons interested in farming.
Oh no, they
grapes.
ripped up that vineyard, yeah.
Yeah, and so
Oh.
when he met Brock, and I'm sure, I don't know, when you guys met, you had your own relationship, but I mean, he looked at Brock and was like, you want to do this? And this is something that I like. He really was so proud that we wanted to do this.
No, I wouldn't say that
Yeah.
he really was fanciful of Brock, it's probably you.
There is no question about that.
Yeah, Richard.
There were a couple times, I had to run interference.
Yes, Richard was,
Hey,
he liked the ladies.
We were downtown in Paso, there's this Vine Street. And so we lost my dad at a very young age. Pops left this planet. He's 57 years old. So my mom high school sweethearts, never got remarried. But the story's going to turn to Richard. So we were down on Vine Street because we have this big Victorian showcase. It's on Vine Street, downtown. Those of you that live here know about it. So I don't know, this was probably 10 years ago or so. And Mom came up. She lives down in Rio Grande. And so we're sitting at, was it Norma May's house or somewhere? At the Victorian house right there on Vine Street. Mom's with us and stuff. So we're sitting down. And then I'm talking to Richard. And then I turn around. And then I said, turn around. And he's hitting on Mom. What's going on right now? She loved it. She thought it was awesome. So I already know your reputation. So we're gonna keep this platonic.
Brock, if you had worn a skirt, perhaps you would have been.
Yeah, that's right. That's good. Yeah. It could have been fresh meat there or whatever. But yes.
So I have another question.
Absolutely.
I appreciate the stories that you're sharing about Richard Surratt and your relationship with him. I mean, another family that had a lot to do with the cultivation of Zinfandel in the last century was the Ducey family.
Mm-hmm.
So, did Richard Surratt have connections with the Duceys?
Not really. So when we talk about old world Zinfandel, so the Duceys, the Pezentis, and the Rodas, three old school avenues of Zinfandel. Richard Surratt was a poor, penuried farmer. He didn't have the gravitas and the name recognition as the other three did. So those are the ones today that really, when we speak about Paso Robles, the Zinfandel, put Paso on the map. Ducey, Pezenti, Roda. Roda is gone, Pezenti is in disrepair. Ducey does exist. But we are the last living legacy of Richard Surratt, who was parallel to that arena, but didn't have the recognition.
Yeah, and I won't speak to some of the things that I don't want to say too much, but I think there's a couple things at play. You kind of look at what's happening with Ducey in particular, and I see some of the management because those vineyards are, we're 101. We got Target on one side, and so the new Ducey vineyards on that side. We've got the old Ducey vineyard that was planted in the mid-20s is on the I guess east side of 101, and you see some of the farming practices that have been taking place the last 4 or 5 years. It gives me pause. They're just going in a direction that doesn't align with what the two of us are doing. The traditional farming, there you see some synthetic products being used now, and so those are things that are alarming to me. And I don't know if it's the new generation that's not wanting to, because the way that we farm takes a lot of time and effort And,
Labor
I
intensive.
mean, it just does. I mean, we made the transition, so when we first started, we I was, schooled at Cal Poly, and we used, I was taught to use synthetic products, so, we sprayed with herbicides and pesticides, for many years, and then, one day I woke up and I'm like, dude, we're living in this city, like, we gotta change, and so, to make that change was pretty radical from an equipment standpoint, because we, like I shared, we're on a hillside, we've got terracing going on, so I have to have some implements that allow me to be able to get in between the vines to clear out vegetation and weeds so we can preserve the moisture and whatnot. And so it was a big learning curve for me, and so we've gotten away from that. And so now you see in vineyards that we're doing traditional farming and now going more towards this, I call it synthetic products, that you're using, and I just don't think that's, that comes along for the ride in the glass. It just does. Like, you can't get away from it. So I think there's that, and I think part of it, Richard kind of beat to his own drum, so I think he felt like sometimes he was kind of the redhead stepchild or shunned from, the Ducey name. Not that, I don't believe the Duceys ever gave off that vibe or that aura, but I always felt like he was kind of in the, in the shadow, right?
The reason why I asked the question
it's a great question.
is that, when I, as a person who really doesn't understand vineyard management, when I look at the Benito Ducey vineyard or the Dante Ducey vineyard, those are old vine Zinfandel vineyards, and they are all hit pruned, and so from my perspective, it's exactly the same kind of thing that you and Ishka are
Yes,
doing.
it is, yeah.
But I'm not aware about, using any sort of synthetic products on the vinyls.
Yeah, because they're planted where they can cultivate both ways, and we've noticed over the last few years that they're now spraying in between the vines and not actually cultivating. And it was shocking to me because I'm just kind of like, you've gone all these 20 since 1920, and you're in this thing over 100 years, right? Or close to it, and now all of a sudden you're going to go somewhere else, and it just, I don't know, it just doesn't make any sense.
To your question, it's about low density planting as opposed to high density planting. Our vineyards are 600 plants per acre. The current vineyard in places where you travel to, and I call it the Disneyfication of it. Where you go to beautiful tasting rooms where you're titillated and they give you drunk and buy a case of wine and go.
What's wrong with that?
We have 600 plants per acre. They have 2,400 plants per acre. It's not about, it's about eradicating competition. Now, the way Brock and I farm is that we have a love affair with the land. We nurture the land, we protect it. Consequently, the land supplies us with some product that is unique. In most other places, generic. So what do? They take that generic product and they facilitate in the winery. It's a reform school. Yes, yes, yeah. Not here. These wines that you're bringing today are the products of the land. Enjoy it. And take comfort in that. Before it goes.
While we're out there, can I ask one other question? What sort of rootstocks did you choose when you planted your vineyards?
That's a great question. We went in a different direction than he, and I'll speak to what we did. So, we did soil testing, and, we're very limestone calcareous dominant, and so we ended up going with rootstock, and the rootstock is called 110R, so very drought resistant and plays well with rocky, kind of nutrient deficient type soils. So that's the direction that we went. So we actually planted the rootstock, let that get established, and then we actually what we call it, it's called green grafting. So we brought in a crew that actually grafted in the fields rather than it being grafted in a nursery. And
Wow.
That's how we established our vineyard. So that was our.
I, on the other hand, was a lot more gold and had less money than Christian today. So I went on my own routine.
Oh, wow.
Zinfandel on its own routine.
Yes.
So all my Zinfandel is, I have noticed, as put it this way, there are 400 wineries, 40,000 acres of grapes grown. I consider myself to be last. Block my question that I consider myself to be the last remaining individual who still actively farms those vineyards. I learned it from the grandmaster. I'm on my own routine. I feel there's a greater gravitas from planting on your own routine, because when you plant on rootstock, there's an impediment that's tiny, that variety.
Are you at all worried about philosophy?
I only lived for 20 years. I mean, another big dilemma.
Wow, what a legacy right there.
No, some else's problem.
You come to his house, I mean, you're giving a full sanitation from head to toe. Yeah, you're not allowed to. Ishka, stay up here, because you're Ishka. You're up next.
Oh.
Yeah. Can I?
I have more handsome today than that picture.
Yeah, I think this, yeah, exactly. So we got 2 questions, and then I'm gonna, again, I'll turn the floor over to you, so go ahead.
All right, so I'm part again, part and parcel of vineyards, similar to Rock and myself. I'm a professional farmer. Winemaking came in a later stage in my life because I had a big life crisis. And I had to find a way to maintain my marriage. So I said, how do I go about doing this? So I named a winery after my wife's father. Now the marriage is sacred. But again, I'm a proponent and as I said, I'm an immigrant to this country. I have worked, my kids are in places that no one should be. They are acclaimed and persevering, but I'm tethered to the land. Ironically, when I first arrived here, I thought I was going to be a gentleman farmer. I envisioned myself in a nice white linen suit, sitting on the veranda, sipping my gin and tonics. 10:30 in the morning, snapping my fingers and getting the work done. That memory has failed. As I said, 400 winery, I'm the last remaining individual in this farm. So farming is the enterprise of mind. What you drink is the effort, the armpits, the perspiration. The individual, this is what wine is about. It is not it is romance today, but yesterday it was hard work. It was hard work yesterday. Now, all of you should appreciate that when you drink a glass of wine. Who was that person behind that glass of wine? I value this pink suit today because I want to tell you how Zinfandel was assailed. White Zinfandel!
Hey, I got some in the truck.
No personality.
I love it.
Hey, it's good. Here's the tip, man.
No, my
He's done.
He's done.
He's
He
done.
dropped the mic already.
All right, so if back over rock, the difference between the results of your efforts is in the glass, and I noticed quite a bit of difference between the styles of these houses, and it's not always the case. I mean, sometimes when people are doing the same thing in the same AVA, it's difficult to tell the wines apart. We've got slightly different vintages, but do you agree that there is a house style?
Absolutely.
And can you talk about, is it in the winemaking, or is it in the farm? Is it in, I should say, the farming process? Because you were both saying that you farm in a similar way. Or is it in the terroir? Is it that there's a microclimate that is not shared?
Right. Yeah, that's a great question, and questions, and great kind of synopsis of it. So I'm going to help Ishka. So you're going to go to Ishka's wine, which is the second wine. Ishka, you want to talk about? We'll get your question. Ishka, you want to talk about your?
I might have said everything I had to say today.
You're going to rest on light Zinfandel?
Yeah. Don't go out like that, man.
If I'd have known that, I would have brought some lights in. That would have been the bonus floor. So he's got.
It's like, there it is.
What's going on with you, please? So we'll kind of talk about, yeah, I mean, stylistically, the wine should be and will be different. We're in two completely different, microclimates, and I think, kind of going back to that conversation that I was talking about when Justin Baldwin and some of these guys got together and broke up Paso.
He's back.
I think the two of us felt like, I agree. I think it was premature and probably shouldn't have happened. However, it also does speak to the difference of like the Willow Creek, where he's located and where we're located.
And that's almost 10-15 degrees difference.
Yes.
So Paso was just an emerging wine appellation.
You said you were done.
Then once upon a time, the powers to be changed and subdivided into 13 districts. It was a rich engagement. I was against it. I was against it completely.
Why?
Because I want Paso to still grow as Paso Robles.
Exactly.
Not Adelaida versus Willow Creek, Kristen versus San Miguel, and so on and so forth. That's the rich against poor. No, you can't have
And it creates division.
Yeah.
Right? Because now you've got somebody pulling for a certain appellation or district where Ishka is correct. We're a very new wine region, right? And so we're already trying to break up Paso when Michelle and I we talked about us getting on airplanes and we'll do a wine dinner in Florida, and it's a wine dinner, we get up, I start talking about who and how I am, where I come from, and so as soon as I say Paso Robles, I get these looks, and then somebody goes, I got a question. I'm like, what's going on? And it's, where in Napa is Paso Robles located? So that's the point. It's like, why are we trying to break something apart when there's many people that don't even know where in the heck Paso Robles is?
I call it wine mandarin. Yes. Not gerrymandering, but wineland. Someone with the pencil chose all the choice properties and lumped it into this thing called the Willow Creek district. Now, Willow Creek district, if you put that shit on a bottle, you can get $30, $40 more for a bottle of wine. I happen to be in the district. That is not some game that I want to play.
But it is true.
It is true.
I mean,
Just the Beverly Hills.
yeah, and I think you find, you know, the appalachians that have kind of percolated to the top has been Willow Creek, Adelaide. But I mean, in all honesty, there's a reason why, is that those are the areas that we should be growing wine grapes, and they do very well, where you kind of get east of, you know, like Australia. I'm trying to think some of the other districts.
Geneseo.
Geneseo. And again, not to you know, to kind of, like I said, I'm already starting to do it, you know, and you know, where you have distinct little, you know, climate and soil structures and whatnot. So kind of speaking about, to your question about house style, and so, you know, you kind of picture, like, going back to some of the things I talked about, you know, where we're located, we're kind of northwest of Paso, and Paso back in the day was, you know, planted, a lot of west side properties were planted to almonds or almonds and walnuts. And so, where we're at, we're literally planted in the middle of all these almond orchards. So that was actually, that was what was on our property. So I pulled the almonds out and planted grapevines. And so we always try to get this, what I call a little bit of orange blossom or a little bit of toasted almond shows through the Brochelle wines that are estate, and it's that terroir, it's kind of that house style. And so when you think of like Australian wines, in Australia, they plant vineyards, and then they at least out like in Adelaide, in Barossa, they got these crazy winds that come in and create issues with the growing cycle, with shatter. So so what they've done is they planted these huge eucalyptus groves. And so when you taste through a lot of your Australian wines, the first thing that you smell is eucalyptus. And it's a fat, it's the oil that's coming through and being transplanted through the air. And so their wines, depending on where they're planted, you will pick up some of that eucalyptus. I'll give you kind of a crazy story that kind of talks to terroir and where you're located. And this isn't a fairy tale or fun ending to the story, but so we all know, those of you that know Napa is divided by, it's got a valley, right? You've got hillside vineyards on the east side, you've got hillsides on the west side, and so you've got 29 and Silverado Trail are the two roads that run right up the middle, right? And I was reading an article where somebody was talking about, I won't talk about what the winery was or is, but they were talking about that stylistically and the wines were having this weird flavor that kind of came to the table in the last like 10 to 15 years, trying to figure out what the hell was going on. And so we have technology now, talking to kind of what Ishka was alluding to, or talking about how we can manipulate wines, manipulate the vineyard, and try to get some sort of end product. Well, they're trying to figure out what the heck was going on in this vineyard. And so they started running it through a glorified reverse osmosis, and they were able to separate out what was going on, and what they were getting in the wine was what they called and considered smog or car exhaust. And so when you think of Napa, it's so commercialized, and there's so many cars that are going up and down the valley that it has actually manipulated the microclimate that's within Napa Valley on the floor. And so that they pulled that out of the wine. They're like, that's what's changed, and you can't fix that. Because you have cars going in, unless you put some sort of gate, I guess, right? Like you're not allowed to come up 29 or the Silverado Trail, but that's facts. And so going back to what Ishka and I believe is that everything starts in the vineyard. You have to be good stewards. You have to be in the right place at the right time, and that's so they're dealing with some of those vineyards that and there's these guys are getting $200-300 a bottle of wine, and they're getting dealt with
Car exhaust is in high demand.
So, but going back to that kind of, that house style, so now that's your new house style. Yeah, but I mean, that's a true story. And, but we have the technology to be able to kind of manipulate things, and I don't necessarily think that that's necessarily a good thing. And I think that kind of goes back to, I think people are trying to put it like the McDonald's, philosophy, like every vintage, every bottle, everything has to taste the same. And I think Ishka and I, we embrace the nuance of every vintage, puts its stamp. And I love talking about, going all the way back to 1998 and going through those vintages and reading my notes. And we've got, when Bryson, our youngest, was born in 2004, there's some nuances to that vintage that still resonate me and connect me. And that's the thing with wine. Wine will connect that vintage, and it should be different than the one before and the one after.
Right. On that note, because you mentioned something that really...
I had something good that I mentioned?
Wonderful. Now, many of you are fans of a particular wine, right? Year after year after year. How does one attain that? There are two avenues to arrive at the last conclusion. One is that being a professional farmer, you take what Mother Nature has to offer, you tweak the equation, and you meet your protocol goals. Or you can take that happy grape into the winery with the analysis of empirical science. You can make a wine that resonates with all. We are old school. We farm, we tweak the equation to get the consistency of the wine. That's what we do. It's not harder. But honestly, just sample this elixir. We are all about the land and the process. Not the person, the process. Today's winemaking is all about the person. You buy wine based on the reputation of the winemaker. Who is that man? The winery is the Zinfication. You go there, you're titillated by this big grand building, i.e. right here. The vineyard is an unknown quantity. Yeah, about the vineyard. Our winemaking process is low and understated. It's all about the repository to house that wine as it matures. The winemaker, nobody knows your name, nobody knows my name. We know the brand. It's because of the vineyard.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
So the fourth one is Ishka's 2021 Lake. You kind of read through. It's got 80% Zin, Grenache with tea straw, and this is your last cheese, the Italian cow milk cheese. And so we'll talk a little bit. We've been talking about a lot about vineyard and those kinds of things. So I'll transition, at least for myself, because I'm a grower and I'm also a lead winemaker, right? So I'm the guy that's got the farmer's stand in the vineyard, but I'm also the winemaker guy too. So as a winemaker, your job starts in the vineyard, and so Michelle and I were fortunate to have that foresight and that from the beginning is that we knew if we wanted to make stellar wine and we wanted to make something that was absolutely phenomenal, we had to own the vineyard, we had to plant it, we had to be in charge of it, and that has run true all these years. And so when I don't do my homework or I don't manage the vineyard right, that's where it creates problems later down the road when it comes time for harvest. And so yeah, those first few vintages, back my second vintage, so 1999, that was my second vintage, and we were picking the front of our property, so it's west facing, ripens a little bit later because it's the afternoon sun, and anyway, we're down by the road, and this gray truck shows up, and whose truck is it? it's this guy. And he comes in, he comes up the road, he doesn't even get out of the truck. He starts yelling at me before he gets out of the truck. He's all, this isn't, it's not ready. Why are you pinking right now? It's not ready. And so then he gets out of the truck and starts pulling the clusters off the vines. And he's like, you get to the sunlight, you can see the sun through the berries, it's not ready, phonetically.
Wow.
And I'm like, okay, well, can we glue it back on? He didn't like a smart ass, but true story. So yeah, those first vintages were I was learning because I didn't have I had a mentor on this side of it from the grape growing side of it, but he was not a winemaker, and I was transitioning to a grape grower and also trying to make wine. And so those first number of vintages was a lot of trial and error. There were some vintages that didn't make the cut that's literally either got dumped down the drain or was sold to somebody that felt like it was worth something and was worth nothing to me. So kind of fast forwarding for us, we did a cool little sit-down tasting of our wines, and Janelle was there from Ducey, and Toby James, there's a few others, and we talked about, it was all about the wine and winemaking, and some of the things that I do a little differently is I'm a big proponent, and we crush, we're very minimal as far as how we handle the grapes. We come in and we're making sure that any of the leaves or anything that's in there comes out. So we have a sorting table that's pretty aggressive on kind of how we pull stuff out and things that we don't want to end up in the fermenter. And then I do a cold soak, and so the cold soak lasts anywhere from 5 to 6, 7 days. And so we pull the temperature way down, almost to freezing, to where we're in the low 40s. And when I said this, you watch the other winemakers in the room, their jaws just drop. And again, it goes back to patience. So you in order to be able to get to 5, 6, 7 days, you have to make sure that the product of the grapes going in is of sound quality. Otherwise, you're not going to make it through that cold soak. Something's going to go wrong. Microbial or bacteria-wise. And so it was interesting to kind of see their facial expressions when we were kind of going through that. And then they got a chance to taste the wine. And they're like, whoa, this wine is very different than ours. The depth and the sexiness and the tannin and whatnot. And so we do things a little differently.
What gave you the idea to try that cold soak process?
It's common.
I had heard a couple folks, at my age group that were trying that and doing that, and so I said, go for it. And I saw when you heat fermentations, you lose complexity, you lose aromas, and so I saw that side of it, so it kind of made sense to me. I'm like, so if we can keep fermentation temperatures down, keep them cool, you don't burn off or the aromatics don't go away, right? And so I kind of learned early on that keep fermentation temperatures cool, you're going to get more expressive wines. And you see that with whites, whites you'll see that because you're using a lot of refrigeration, you're keeping fermentations cold and cool with whites, and so you're kind of utilizing that same thought process with red wine. But you have to have the ability to have a fermentation that takes somewhere between 2.5 to 3 weeks. Mm-hmm. And most of these folks, I was talking with a couple of people, like I have to turn the tank. I have to get whatever grapes and wine, I have to get it out of there so I have the next round of fruit comes in. I got to get it out, so they're shortchanging, they're fast tracking the process, and so you get a fast track process in here. Mm-hmm. And so I make sure that I have enough tank in storage to where I can get fermentations complete, where I'm not anxious to get something like completely fermented and have to get it out so I can get something else in. So a little different philosophy, yeah, so just, kind of that's the winemaking side of things, and, and how we kind of do things a little differently. All my Zinfandel, for the most part, is native or natural yeast fermentation or indigenous yeast. So it's the yeast that is present in our terroir or in our local environment, and it's risky. You have to understand and know what you're doing, because things can go sideways pretty quick. Sideways.
Not on Zinfandel.
That's when they kill. That's when the sideways kill.
So I would say, in the past 20 years, Zinfandel has been tarnished by its reputation. Yep. Because they need confident mind to have
It's fun to go from here to here, and then from here to here.
voice.
Do you use Zinfandel? Yeah.
You have a pink jacket though.
But when you think about Zinfandel in terms of, you spoke about its same acidity. There is no wine in the universe that has the unique acidity that Zinfandel has. But the fact that it was mismanaged was because Zinfandel is the hardest grape to grow and even the most complex wine to make. The amateur attention to the grape has resulted in its downfall, but not amongst us. Because we understand the complexity about how we farm it. Consequently, the alcohols are not euphoric. People who understand there is a direct correlation between alcohol and acidity, right? You know that? Huh? Everyone is nodding?
Yes.
I don't understand.
Oh, the glass is going down. 2 hands are necessary for this.
At the time, you sat on seesaw, right?
Yes.
Your friends went up and down. When you talk about balance, this girl is on the high side, you are on the low side, and then at one point you come and there's an equilibrium. That's acid, this is alcohol, and the fulcrum is pH. That is the point.
I like that.
How to make it a stage, you can't make it in a
Right into wine. So you and I.
This has been another episode of Exploring the Wine Glass. Thanks for listening. If you have suggestions on what topics you would like me to discuss, please reach out on social media. You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook as Exploring the Wine Glass. I am also on LinkedIn as Lori Hoyt Budd. Of course, you can always email me at exploringthewineglass@gmail.com and sign up for my newsletter at exploringthewineglass.com. If you enjoyed what you heard, please rate, review, and subscribe to help others find me more easily. And most importantly, tell your wine-loving friends, because if you like the podcast, they will too. Podcast music is Wine by Kevins. Until next week, slancha.
Right now. I'm on T-Best for my 10,000.